Well, Donna, thank you for organizing this. Great to see so many of you and others participating in this conversation. Donna, my records, we first connected in 2017. So thank you. You are tenacious. You stay in touch. And I'm glad to support your efforts here this morning. I am going to briefly talk about two things. I'm going to provide some ideas for you at the personal level, why where you live matters enormously. And then the second piece I'm going to touch on is speaking more to age-friendly leaders, which I know quite a number of you are, and what the implications and opportunities are for you. I have a number of slides I want to get through. I'm going to go pretty quick on these. Remind me, Donna, how much time do we have for the presentation piece?
25 minutes. Does that work for you?
That's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. So I'll move quickly here, but feel free as encouraged by Donna. Please be active in the chat if you have any questions, because we'll be able to address some of those at the Q&A portion. But excited to be here. I'm passionate about housing. I should say place. I'm passionate about place, and I'll explain the difference here in a moment. And I am excited to be joining you from Austin, Texas. We also went through a move just before the pandemic from the Mid-Atlantic to Austin, Texas. So I some of the decisions and the process is fresh for me as well. Let me bring up my slides here. So my company is called Here, HERE, and the website's here.life. And I share that with you because I think so much of the opportunity in front of us, really across the age spectrum, is finding our place physically, but also finding our place figuratively. Are we where we should be? Are we the people that we want to be with? Are we doing the things that we want, all within reason, all within being responsible, related to our lives and longevity? So as I sensed, I'm going to start off on the individual level first. I believe that one of the biggest success stories of the prior century was that life expectancy more or less doubled from around kind of early 40s to approaching 80. It is astounding. Much of that was because of advances in our healthcare system, particularly in the early days of life. But you probably have seen, as I know has been impacted somewhat within Ohio, we've seen a drop in life expectancy. And that drop has been in part due to the kind of deaths of despair that we hear about with the opioid usage and so on, a really concerning ongoing trend. But for those with college educations, growing life expectancy is continuing to rise. And you'll see here at the life expectancy for those at 25, it's now approaching about 85. And experts talk about those who are born today in the US, half of them are expected to at least live to 100. So we are in this reality of century lives. And a lot of our systems haven't necessarily caught up because you'll see in the OECD countries, of which the US is part of it, we're seeing people living longer, and now that means longer years in retirement. For men, that's approaching 20. For women, it's approaching 25. Dawn already shared her view in terms of retirement. I too have some issues with that term itself. With the word retire, by Webster's would suggest it means to withdraw, to pull away from, which is exactly opposite around the research of successful aging. But there's good news, I suppose, and that is Dr. Michael Rosian. He's a physician who is also in Ohio, the Cleveland Clinic. He wrote a book recently called The Great Age Reboot. And he believes that there's, based on advances in genomics and other technologies, that we are headed for another boost in longevity. And not to alarm you, but and this is some of his estimates, not necessarily those of the Cleveland Clinic, but he believes that in 2030, we'll see people that are healthy will have a benefit of further longevity. So suppose you're 55 today. When you were born, your life, and you're a woman, when you were born, your life expectancy was 74. He believes that it might be as high as 115 based on 2030 because of some of these advances that may be coming. And that would mean you have another 60 years of life as of 2022. So again, this is not, I wouldn't go take this to the bank, but the point is, this is not static. There are advances that are happening that suggest that this 100-year life may be further extended. Now, despite what we hear in the press, actually life gets better after 50. In fact, this is a global phenomenon called the U-shaped happiness curve. There's a certain level of happiness in your 20s, and then you go down this somewhat precipitous decline, and you hit the nadir point around 50. I am in my late 40s. We've got 3 teenage kids, so I think it has something to do with having teenage kids in the house. And then you pick up in your 50s and 60s. And so by the time you're in your 70s and beyond, your life satisfaction, your reported well-being is greater than it's ever been. Now, there's a few things to think about. It's not just living longer. What we really want to be focused is on what's the quality of our life at the same time. So there's a term that a number of experts use called squaring the curve. And that is that ideally, your quality of life matches your lifespan, and then you have a high quality of life, and then boom, your life is over. But there's no diminished quality of life. In practice, that's not really how it is, particularly for those that have a longer lifespan, is that there is some diminishing of quality of life that happens over time. And so the idea is, what can we do through our life interventions, which I'll get into in a moment, that effectively take this curve and push it to behave more as a square. So as you live longer, your quality of life is minimally diminished. That's the ideal. Well, I believe it's not just about lifespan, which we spent time talking about moments ago, but it's also about well span, the amount of financial resources you have over a period of time for the type of life that you're looking for, as well as health span. What is your quality of health over that period of time? So I believe that many of us are targeting not just lifespan, but how lifespan, well span, and health span intersect. So here, the intersection of this Venn diagram, that's really our desired outcome. Part of the good news to share with you is that we have agency in this. We actually our lifestyle and also environmental decisions that we have, the places that we're part of, is far more important than our DNA. Our DNA researchers tell us only account for about 80% or only about 20%, or in other studies less, of our actual longevity. So how we on the margin choose to live our lives and the environments that we're part of are much more important. 80% or more of our longevity is linked to that. There is a well-being index that was created by Gallup Healthways, and they break our well-being into 5 different areas: social, purpose, physical, financial, and community or place. And as I'll break each of these out individually, but want to recognize that to see a little bit of the punchline is that where we live has a dramatic impact, either directly or indirectly, on each of these. Let's tackle purpose for a second. Purpose is one of the greatest predictors of happiness, and people with defined purpose tend to be psychologically and physically healthier than those who do not. And when I say purpose, this really links this idea of being goal-oriented and motivated by a desire to make a difference in the world beyond oneself. Incidentally, I can tell from the chat, a number of you are quite mission-driven people. So this is an area I think a number of you thrive in. On the other hand, individuals without purpose are more likely to suffer from depression, loneliness, and anxiety. And those with purpose tend to have lower cholesterol, as lower rates of obesity, and less likely to have Alzheimer's disease. So this matters a lot, and it's purpose on a daily basis that you can point to. Well, social connection, the second piece of the well-being index, as I'm sure a number of you have heard, people that are chronically lonely, it has the health equivalent of smoking over a pack of cigarettes each day. And unfortunately, we are, by some people's measures, we're in a friendship recession. This is a comparison of data in the American Youth Time Survey of 2021 to 1990, so a 30-year period. And I'll focus on the men in this particular exercise, but you'll see in 1990, about 40% of men said they had 10 or more close friends outside of family. Well, today that number is about 15%. So it's about a third of what it once was. Similarly, on the other side, there were only 3% of people of men that said they had no close friends outside of family. Today, that number has grown 5x. It's about 15%. And for a variety of different reasons, we're just finding it harder now to make friends, to sustain friends, and yet it's so critical for our health and well-being. Part of it's the political polarization that's happening. This chart just illustrates the fact that vis-a-vis 1978 to the present area, the partisanship where we have a feeling of kind of negativity to someone that has a different political view has more than doubled, close to tripled this kind of sentiment of animosity. And also it's created a self-sorting that's happening. We're also tended to spend more time alone as we age. Loneliness is something that's subjective. It's this idea that you don't feel as close to as many people as you desire. But it is correlated to time spent alone. And you can see here, vis-a-vis people at age 20, focus on the yellow curve here, that as we get older, in our 40s and beyond, we tend to spend more and more time, more of our discretionary time alone. At the same time, you'll see our family, which is the blue curve, tends to level out once these characters are launched to the real world. And then we have time with our partner, but also time with our friends can dissipate as well. So this is a concern because the more time we spend alone is time that we're not necessarily spending investing in others. But we have something happening also at the society level, and that is that we're spending more time alone as a society. And so this is independent of age, socioeconomic status, and so on. We're as compared to 2013, a trend that was starting well before the pandemic, we're now spending close to 10 hours per week alone, time that's being away from our friends and away from our companions. And we also have some trends that are concerned related to our youth, because part of having an age-friendly society is not just being mindful of older adults, but those who are younger and how can they have fulfilling, impactful lives. And you'll see here, today's youth are less likely to get a driver's license, less likely to try alcohol, less likely to date significantly and work for pay. All things that are has some relationship to associating with others. You may have seen there's this fantastic longitudinal study at Harvard that's been going on for over 80 years. And there was a book that came out recently called The Good Life that talks about the key lessons. People check in, they fill out a study each year. They have their physicians send records to the participants. They've had a retention rate of about 85%. The analysis over this long period of time is that good relationships keep us healthy and happier, period. And the people that are most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. So this is like a real kernel related to healthy longevity. But there's also physical well-being. It's how active are we? How well do we sleep? What's our nutrition? I was part of a health conference a few years ago for the most recent U.S. Surgeon Generals. They put it in one word: move. Just move it is one piece. I'll be light on this element in the interest of time. But what we can do is we can mix these things. We can have social connection meeting physical well-being. So pickleball has become quite a trend. It seems everywhere. We have neighbors of ours here in Austin that have turned their tennis court into a community pickleball festival. It seems every day there are people playing. So it's awesome because you're seeing people not just be active, but also develop these social relationships. And financial well-being, which I know is a concern for many of us, including those on the call, it's not just your income that matters. It's really financial security. That is 3 times the impact of income and overall well-being. So how do we make sure that we have a good relationship to our expenses and income and assets over a longer period of time? And I know Tim's going to talk about some of that a bit with the affordable housing here later in today's Zoom. And then just place in and of itself. So the right place satisfies your physical and emotional and psychological needs and desires, particularly as we get older. Is there more to maintain than we may like? Are there stairs? There's a bunch of different physical elements that are valuable to us, but also, is it emotionally? Is this where we have this sense of home? Is this where we belong? These are key, really important questions as we evaluate our place. And so when I say physical place, it's not just our physical dwelling, it's our neighborhood, it's our urban, suburban, rural area, it's our metro area, it's our state, it's our region, it's our country, it's a region of the world. All of these things combined make up our day-to-day lived experience. And so you might be in a spot where your physical dwelling's working well for you, but maybe your neighborhood's changed. Maybe you don't know your neighbors the way they used to. Maybe there's stuff that's happened in your metropolitan area. It's not as safe. It's not growing. There's concerns there. Or to flip it upside down, maybe you love your metropolitan area. Maybe the Miami Valley is awesome for you. That's where you belong. But maybe your physical dwelling's not the right place anymore. Maybe it's too expensive. It's too much. There's too much maintenance. A bunch of different factors. So it's this composite that's so important. So when I say place, going back to Donna's point, I'm not just talking housing. I'm talking about this composite. It's housing, but so much more. And also it matters. You're seeing meaningful life expectancy varying by country and neighborhood as much as 20 years. So there is DNA, there's components here that really make a difference. You'll see in this particular graph, it ranges by 20 up to 20 years here. Then neighborhoods in certain cities vary by as much as 30 years. So we're still getting to the bottom of why that matters, but it does matter. And you have healthy cities, and this is part of the opportunity for Miami Valley is what can you do to be attractive, which we'll get to in a second. So I'm sharing with you at the individual level that place, I believe, is really a life hack. If you want to lose weight or live longer, don't try to change your behavior, change your environment. That's guidance from Blue Zones, a book you may have heard of. And really a lot of it's being in a spot where you can get 1% better every day. So I believe where you live is much more than a place. It's one of the most important decisions you'll make. It determines your best health, success, and fulfillment. And when you are at your best, you're here, which is really the basis for the brand that I've created. And place matters for the physical, emotional, and psychological reasons I talked about, but where you live impacts purpose. To be around those that share a similar purpose. It also impacts social connection by who you're close to, and it impacts your physical well-being in terms of being able to be active the way you might want to, and also kind of financially. Does it meet your financial needs? So I'd like to do, in the remaining time, just a couple more minutes, I want to share with you, so place matters. So here's the book that Donna mentioned earlier, Right Place, Right Time. And so I believe the real goal is to be the right place for the right chapter, for each chapter of life. And to shift gears for age-friendly leaders, you think about this, we should not make housing be a binary choice of either you age in place, oftentimes in a suburban home that can be remote from where other places are, or skilled nursing, an area. I'm an expert in senior housing and some know areas across the country, quite a bit about it. So there are a myriad of existing and emerging options, but we need more. And that's really an opportunity for you age-friendly leaders here. How can we do this better? And so I believe as age-friendly leaders, your area of greatest influence is how can we create better physical dwellings, the housing? How can we create that better? How can we improve the neighborhoods to make them more age-friendly? What does it mean? What are the differentiated areas in urban, suburban, and rural, and then at the metro area? What metro policies can be handled, or county as well that have an influence. So I believe there's limitations with aging in place. I talk about a bit, see more detail in my book as well as on the here.life website, but there's a flaw. This is not my house, but the idea that you have a forever house, I think doesn't necessarily give enough respect to the fact that people change and places change. And if you're trying to thrive, we got to create more options. One of the options that people talk about that we desperately need more of, I suspect you probably need this in your area as well, is middle housing. Duplexes, fourplexes, courtyards, this idea that there's options in between detached single-family houses and mid-rises, ones that are smaller, less expensive, but also help build community. You're seeing emergence of age-friendly multifamily, or age-restricted, more apartments that are designed for community and for older adults in mind. Age-friendly multifamily, how can we create more apartments? I specifically developed this in the DC area, where we took an apartment building, modified it, expanded it, so it had universal design throughout, created opportunities for people to get to know their neighbors, created actually leases with longer lease terms so it would be easier for people to make it their home. What can we do to create better opportunities for people that age so that if they want to stay longer, they can, their housing doesn't force them out. And one of the benefits, of course, here is you have intergenerational relationships that happen, which there's been a lot of positives that have been pointed out through research. Age-restricted for sale and rental single-family housing. This is a picture of Margaritaville. But this idea of having specific single-family housing that's rental, that's designed with people in mind, you're seeing that as older people in mind to make it age-friendly. That's a real opportunity. It's one of the growth areas right now in our country. Accessible dwelling units, ADUs. You're seeing this emerge, particularly in places where municipalities are making it easier to create these. One of the benefits is they can be designed in such a way that it works for people of all ages. This isn't just necessarily for older adults. You can rent it out. Your people in your main house. There's a lot of opportunities there. Pocket neighborhoods and co-housing. So it's not just the design of the house, but how can we do things in the design that connect people together? One of the benefits Ohio has vis-a-vis some other places in the country is your land is less expensive than some other places. And there may be opportunities for some clever pocket neighborhoods where you become co-owners, you have front porches, you're able to collaborate together, you create this social connection, that tissue that's so important. Home sharing, what can we do to make it easier for people to rent homes or even rooms to create income streams, but also kind of the golden girls of today, if you will, where people get some of that connected tissue by thinking differently about their homes. Multi-generational home building. You're seeing this with some of the major home builders, Lennar and others. They're building multi-generational housing to begin with. So Donna went through her story about triangulating among her kids. You're seeing some people actually living together in purpose-built housing where they have different means of egress, but private spaces, but also some communal spaces. And of course, intergenerational housing. What can we do where we just make it easier for more people to intermix across the generations, that it just makes it conducive without necessarily trying to try hard? We run into and we create more of that tissue that we talked about is being so important. So I just want to wrap up, a few as we handle any questions or comments. Please take a moment, go to the here.life website. There's a blog I do every other week to help people think more about why place is so foundational in planning for a long, healthy, financially secure, socially connected life. You can, Right Place, Right Time, my book is available Amazon and other channels if that's something of interest to you. I have a Right Place assessment on the website. It takes a couple minutes, allows you to just get a quick check around, am I in the right place right now? Or are there areas where I could do more, do better? That assessment provides a graph afterwards and a series of recommendations and links to resources on your journey. Age-friendly leaders, please reach out. Happy to encourage you, happy to provide some content that may be helpful. I think it's so important that the grassroots level, we create better opportunities so people don't feel forced out of their communities. Florida should not be the answer for everyone. There are things that we can do. One thing that happens when people do move, they lose those social connections, that social capital that's so valuable. So there's such an important opportunity that many of you have. And then lastly, I'll follow up with Donna on this afterwards. People have asked me to do a workshop version of Right Place, Right Time, this core content. And so I've done some beta tests earlier this year in person, Austin, and virtually, to create an opportunity for people to lean into this content. I'm doing another one, which is actually going to be 4 sessions. Starting next week. There's an application for people, though, for those that are interested. That deadline is on Thursday. So I'll circulate information on that as well. If you personally are interested in how can you dig in to create more of a plan, that really is where this fits in. So thank you for your time, Don. I hope this is what you were looking for in terms of little content for individuals and then at the leader level. But I hope that gives you something to think about.
It does, Ryan. And in fact, I want to put the spotlight back on you. I'm blown away. I knew this was going to be incredible. It's unbelievable. So thank you for sharing it. And I apologize if the pace is fast. I think that the reach is kind of broad with this audience. Our hope is to drill down further. And in fact, Ryan, I'm working hard on trying to figure out how we bring you to Dayton, because I just think there's so much here. The multi-generational thing, when you actually, before I met you in person, I read about the stories, I watched your videos, and even that whole experience. Are you in an expert capacity advising builders and communities as to how to create those types of multi-generational?
Yeah. So so my passion, if it isn't evident, is I care a lot about the role of place, literally and figuratively, in helping us plan for a long, successful life. And so part of my work and the work of here is to help people make better informed decisions, because it matters so much. I know it's complex, but it matters so much. On the other hand, and I call that the demand side. On the other hand, we got to create better places. This is where age-friendly leaders are so important. This is where real estate developers are so important. This is where investors are so important. Understand that language. We know Donna, to your point earlier, there are some headwinds right now with inflation and concerns about recession. But that being said, I describe that the supply side. So I believe we have an opportunity to have better informed demand to make sure people are going to the right place, but we also have to create better places. And part of those better places, to your question, is around intergenerational and multi-generational. And so I work with real estate developers here in the US, some internationally, around creating better places, communicating the message in a compelling way to really create this sense of community that's possible. And I think there's importance in this regardless of age. If there are, I know sometimes the Villages gets some negative critiques as a enclave of older adults and living their lives somewhat independent of the world. But I'll tell you what, on the positive side, a number of those people have community and they're involved and they're engaged. And I would argue that's better than being alone and isolated, lacking purpose. That said, we have done some things as a society that have separated people by age. And I think that's very unfortunate because it hurts younger people, it hurts older people. And in today's world, living to 100, there are a bunch of generations, not just one or two. And so I've had firsthand experience, as I mentioned in the project and the stories, building apartments that are intergenerational. When I say intergenerational, that means by definition, we are creating kind of multiple generations there. When I say multi-generational, it's somewhat of an interchangeable term. However, when I talk about the Lennar development, where you have a specific design sometimes I see that as an environment where it's housing that is multi-generational. Whereas when we have mixed use, multiple different types of housing, I see that as truly intergenerational. Because we have more and more mixes of people from different backgrounds. That has a vibrancy when you live amongst quite a number of people that is different than just a single family house with, kind of multiple people as part of it from different. So that's how I see some of the distinction. And I see more of this coming down the pike, Donna, back to your question. And we so desperately need it, where at a minimum, from a real estate developer perspective, we're giving people more options for not just young people to move into apartment, for example, but people of a wider range. It effectively broadens your market. And I see that for a bunch of reasons, a trend that's going to be happening going forward.
I'm wondering with longer lifespans, if we're going to move through different priorities. Like right now, I'm in my 60s and I want multiple generations. I want to interact with people younger than I am, older than I am. I suspect as if I'm graced with a life that runs into my 80s, I might be more wanting to be with like-aged people in the latter years.
So I think that we are, as a society and individually in particular, we have a hard time predicting our future. We don't necessarily know what the future Ryan Frederick's going to want. We don't necessarily know what the future Donna Kastner is going to want or need, right? Because there's so many variables in life. But I think part of the societal opportunity is to just create more options. And so there are intergenerational options. There are opportunities for people to connect at very similar life stages and age stages. I do think, as I harped on a bit, I think during my prepared words, our social network is so important in our health and vibrancy. And so that I think one of the pieces of people, say in their 80s, like you mentioned, Donna, is that it's really important to at least have some subset of that network be people from a similar life stage so they can appreciate the dynamics that you're going through. So, but yeah, we need more options. That's a key part of it.
And I appreciate the changing landscape. We're coming off of an unprecedented time in history. All these things just throw more, changes in the dynamics. What is it, the Henry Ford quote? If I asked people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses.
That's right.
And I see Richard's iPad with a hand up. And Richard, if you can maybe ask your question directly.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I joined late. I couldn't get on early, but I'm associated with an organization on the west side of Dayton called Wesley Dayton, and it's a poor area. There's a lot of abandoned housing. Crime is an issue. There's a lot of single parent families. And what you've said is really exciting, but at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is going to take a lot of money. What do you do? What are your suggestions with a poor neighborhood? How do we make it? I mean, you certainly don't want to replicate that through the generations. You want to improve it too at the same time. How do you deal of the concept that you were talking about, but with the need to raise the base, so to speak?
Well, yeah, thanks for that easy question, Richard.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Prior to moving to Austin, we lived in Baltimore for a decade. So I can appreciate firsthand the dynamics of disparities in neighborhoods and the challenges to create thriving blocks and neighborhoods. And so I would first say, yeah, it's really complex. It's very complex. It's hugely necessary. And as Tim will get into, it's complex related to lining up the funding for housing and affordable housing. What I would say is that there are a little bit of a longer conversation, but there's some encouraging things happening right now because you're seeing, for those that in some of the policy areas, there's something called the social determinants of health, SDOH. And housing is now increasingly being seen as a social determinant of health. And so you're seeing health insurers, health systems now care about housing more than they did in the past because they recognize that it is, for the reasons I outlined in the first half of my presentation, they're fundamental in creating this lived experience for people. I'm on the board of Johns Hopkins School of Nursing, and Hopkins has been leading a program called Capable, where they've been going into people's homes to renovate people's homes to keep them there, but also they're mindful about the social network. So I would say, to answer your question, is it's not easy, but finding stakeholders in the local community and within the health insurance area, I think can be a good place to start, but also have your eyes wide open. And I would also say that truthfully, we can we can make better places, and people can make better decisions across all income stratas. So while I think it's important to create better options for those in the lower income piece, absolutely, that's urgent. I just would be mindful that we don't focus all of our energies there, because we're then going to miss out in other avenues to help people, in their stretches. Last caveat to this is more of a macro point, but I think there's an opportunity for creating more age resilient communities. If Dayton, for example, can be seen as, hey, this is a spot that has better housing, a better mindset, an opportunity to thrive here, then that's an opportunity to bring more income and assets into the community that'll create a better tax base that can be redeployed in other areas too. So it's, I think you need to think about this in broad ways and for the longer term. And not necessarily what the impact will be the next year, but what could this look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road? Because the time to plan's now.
Thank you.
Ryan, you've sparked all kinds of thoughts for us, and we just don't have time to get as deep into this. I'm going to encourage everyone on this webinar to chime in the chat box with any questions you have. We'll download the transcript. Serena, you've got that there, hopefully, because and then maybe I can circle back with you, Ryan, on email and get some answers to some of the questions we didn't tackle. And you have my public statement here. I got to find a way to get you to Dayton, and I'm going to figure out how we're going to do that, because there's just so many things you've touched on today that I think would open up more meaningful and more relevant conversations. And age resilient, I am running with that one. That is awesome.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's great to spend time with you all. And I love the energy that you have, Donna, your leadership, your different talents, as we've been introduced to, at least I've been introduced to. But it's a journey, and I think it's an exciting journey. I think it's one that comes with responsibility. And if there's any way I can be helpful in Dayton's journey, be happy, and others be happy to find ways to do that. So I'll put a couple of links here. I need to jump in a moment, but I'll add a couple of links here, and I wish everyone the best in your personal, but also your leadership journeys.
And Tim Beat, president of St. Mary Development Corporation, is now our featured speaker.
Great. Thank you, Donna. And thanks to Ryan. That was great information. It dovetails so well with what I want to share today, especially about some of these things about local decision-making, supply side, kind of economics with housing. I am the president of St. Mary Development Corporation. We're a 34-year-old faith-based nonprofit headquartered in Dayton. And we've developed about 5,000 units of affordable housing, mostly in Southwest Ohio, but actually in 9 different states. And we've done more than $500 million in housing development. Just in Dayton, we house more than 1,000 older people. And we've, in addition to that, to creating the housing, we also provide service coordination. So we connect our residents to the services they need to remain independent as long as possible as they age. And our primary goal is really about what Ryan had mentioned, social determinants of health. It's removing these negative social determinants of health so that we can improve the quality of life of the people that live in our buildings. And as Donna mentioned, we'll share my slides, because some of the charts I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. You may want to dive into them a little bit more deeply later on. And while a lot of the examples I give are for Dayton and Ohio, I know there's people from other places. The concepts I share are the same almost everywhere. We've done housing in 9 states. We see these things. So it doesn't matter whether you're on the coasts or in the Midwest, you'll see some of these same concepts. So in many ways, good housing doesn't vary by age. We all want the ability to live in our housing for the long term, if that's what we desire, assuming that our needs don't change. And we want to be close to amenities that we value, including family and friends. And perhaps most important, we want our housing to be affordable so we can pay for other things that we need, including healthcare, food, transportation. And so from that standpoint, whether we're young or old, our need for housing is kind of the same. We want to be part of a community and a place, as Ryan had said. But for older people, affordability is one of the most important factors. We're blessed in this country to have long life expectancy. America's population of people 90 and older has almost tripled since 1980. In 2010, it was 1.9 million people. It'll be over the next 40 years, we'll see that go up to more than 7.5 million people. But here's the thing, having the financial resources to live 20 to 30 years after retirement is very difficult. So in the United States, the median retirement income for people 55 to 64 is only about $90,000. So $90,000 is not a lot of money if you live into your 90s. To live 20 or 30 years on $90,000, even with Social Security, is pretty difficult. So when it comes to this affordability, as you look at an age-friendly community, what factors do you actually control as a community? What factors do you control so that you can make your town or city more age-friendly? Well, you don't have much control over construction costs or interest rates. Those are largely outside your control. You may have some control over population growth by making your community an attractive place to live and really becoming age-friendly. That's one of the reasons, is to make your community an attractive place to live. And I would say you influence that. You don't have total control over it, but you influence it quite a bit. But then there's government policy, especially local housing policy and zoning, and especially around the density of housing. That is something that is in local communities' control and is a key factor. It's the primary driver of affordability. It's especially important for people as they age, yet it's often not used effectively or used at all, really, in some communities. Often higher density housing, especially apartment buildings, are preferred by people as they get older. Apartment buildings are more likely to have better accessibility, zero-step entries, elevators, as well as on-site amenities, exercise rooms, meeting rooms, and places for kind of group meeting and space. So this census data that I'm sharing, it only goes through 2015, but it shows a 28% increase in renters who are older than 55. And in 2022, just more than 30% of people over 55 were renters. And we will see this increase as people age because the cost of owning and maintaining a home will be significantly more than renting in many cities. So my prediction is that no matter what community that you are in, you will see more older people opting to rent over time. Maybe not when they're 65 or 75, but at some point, renting is going to seem to become a much better option for them. What exactly is housing density, though? Really, housing density is simply the number of housing units within a geographic area. So the more units you have in a certain geographic area, the higher the density. In the example on the screen, you might have 100 new homes in a new subdivision. So you divide the geographic area by the 100 homes, and that's what your density is. Let's say your local zoning policy requires 100 feet of street frontage for each home. So that's 1.89 miles of street frontage for the 100 homes. But if the requirement was only 75 feet of street frontage, it would reduce the total by almost half a mile, by 0.47 miles. That extra 0.47 miles increases infrastructure costs by 25% per home compared to the 100 feet of street frontage. Another way of saying that is that instead of building 3 homes per 300 feet, you could build 4 homes. That's an additional 33 homes in 1.89 miles. Higher infrastructure costs increase the price of new homes, making them less affordable. But they also increase your city's ongoing operational expenses and costs for the community, driving up property taxes even more. Plus, if you have more homes in the same area, it means more real estate revenue, real estate tax revenue. So increased density is very good for cities economically. Often you don't think about the increased operational costs when adding homes to a community. For instance, in our 100 new home example, there's an extra half mile of road. So there's also an extra half mile that's extrapolated to other areas. So that's 172 miles per year in addition to drive the school bus to pick up kids. It's 284 additional miles for a mail truck. And it's an additional 5 miles of snow plowing, assuming 10 storms a year. But roads are a long-term investment. So over 30 years, that's more than 5,000 miles for the school bus, 8,500 miles for mail delivery, and 140 miles for snow plowing. That doesn't even include road repair costs. And this is only one development. And remember that if a city's population declines, the expenses of low-density housing remain the same. So the city of Dayton has to maintain roads for a city of 240,000 people because that's what the population was at its peak, even though there's only 140,000 living there now. So some cities have population increases, others have decreases. The chart here shows some Dayton area communities. Miamisburg and Trotwood have slight decreases that they're looking at. When your population decreases, you still have to maintain those roads. If you have empty houses like Dayton does, maintain those neighborhoods, which can be very expensive. Now, the extra half mile might not seem like it's a lot, but if you were planning a new city from scratch and your new city had 25,000 homes, you're talking about an extra 118 miles of road when you plan for low density. 118 miles, that's a little more than driving from Dayton to Cincinnati and back. That is a lot of extra roads. You don't really notice them because you're not driving straight 118 miles, but that's really what the bottom line is. And as Ryan had shared, in the United States, population growth is pretty flat. We're approaching 0% growth, and we've had population decline for the past few years. And in Ohio, we've had several years of population decline, as you can see from the red areas of this chart. So when you're thinking about housing, which is going to be around for 50 to 100 years or more, you need to think about the needs today, but you need to think about the need decades from now and what the impact will be decades from now. What seems like a great thing today may not be what's needed 40 years from now, but somebody will be dealing with the issues of that housing 40 years from now. A good example is Youngstown, Ohio. They had a significant population decline that actually required them to decommission many streets because they had so few people that lived on them. And the cost of maintaining those streets was too high. So when you have higher density, it helps to minimize this type of risk. What you're seeing, those red streets on the map, they decommission them. So not only did they pay to create them, then they pay to take them out of service. And the quote on the slide here is from a study about Youngstown. It's particularly instructive. The financial mismatch between rising maintenance costs and declining tax revenues could lead to massive infrastructure failure and municipal bankruptcies, with potentially tragic consequences for remaining residents and businesses. I would say in Dayton, for those of you who know Dayton, that's what we've seen. We've seen tragic consequences for residents and businesses based on population decline. And I would suggest for older people living in decommissioned neighborhoods, the impact is especially negative. So this is really important, not just for being age-friendly today, but really thinking about what does age-friendly mean for the next generation as well. Where land is expensive, building more homes per acre increases affordability. You can see from the example here, the same lot could fit one 3,000 square foot single family home, or 3 townhomes, or 6 condos. Now, obviously, the goal isn't to only have high-rise apartment buildings, which would have the highest density, but there are more gentle ways to increase density, such as townhomes, 2 to 4 family homes, small-scale apartments, and condos. But there is also a place for larger multifamily buildings, 50-plus unit apartment buildings. This is good development for everybody in a community, but especially for people as they age and for older people who often prefer not to own a house anymore. And they want to be within a community of people their age, and they want to be in something that's more affordable for them. In the example of the 100-unit single-family home development that I shared, in that same space, we could put in a 100-unit apartment community, along with 10 townhomes and 20 condos, as well as a public park. The denser option has no public roads to plow or maintain, a much shorter distance for the school bus and mail trucks to drive, plus it provides more green space to enjoy. And we should see these type of developments in every city in addition to single-family homes. It's not an either or, but even in rural communities, you should see some of this going on, but often we don't. Another way to increase the density and improve housing affordability is through accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. So these create a smaller independent dwelling located on the same site as a single-family home. It could be a detached ADU, it could be attached to the house, it could be above a garage, in a basement, a converted garage or attic. But the key is your zoning has to allow this to happen. Some places forbid this, and you're not allowed to have ADUs or certain types of ADUs. And I'll give you an example. This is a long time ago, but my first apartment out of college was, the apartment was the first floor of a 1,400 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-story house. The owner was in her 80s and lived upstairs, which she had turned into an apartment. I helped with yard chores. I got an affordable apartment. She got extra income. It was great for both of us. It worked out very well. When we built our current home in Beaver Creek, we designed it with density in mind. So it's a 2,500 square foot home, but it has a walkout basement. So we have 5 bedrooms in 2,500 square feet. The first floor has a master bedroom, so we can live on that and age in it without using the stairs at all. The basement we set up, it could be a separate apartment, and we've had families stay there for months at a time. 2 of the first floor bedrooms are joined by a Jack and Jill bathroom, and we designed it so it could be converted into an in-law apartment if my father-in-law ever needed to move in with us. The stairs to the basement, we made a little wider, so if we needed a stair lift chair, we could put it in. And all of our doors have handles, the lever handles instead of knobs. So even when you're building a new home, you can think about what is the density in your current home, and is there a way to increase density? Because it may be creating new homes. We want to think about apartment, single-family homes in density, but even within current homes, we can put more people in current homes and increase density. Now, here's an interesting question. Do we hate new housing? And I would contend that in a way we do. These headlines show opposition to housing, some of which St. Mary was involved with. In fact, I heard a large market rate developer, this is a market rate developer, not affordable housing, say that regardless of the type of housing, if a new housing project goes on a ballot for the community to vote on, it is almost always voted down. It doesn't matter if it's high-priced single-family homes, senior condos, and affordable high-rise. People tend to think the worst when it comes to new housing. They think it will create traffic jams, ruin the environment, it's going to crowd our schools, it will have a negative impact on the community. And in my experience, those fears are rarely based in fact. But our attitude tends to be, once we have our housing, we don't want others to move in close to us. I've seen this in my own neighborhood. We saw this in Yellow Springs recently. Yellow Springs desperately needs new housing. And the housing got pushed out, and they weren't willing to put in it. And this was high-end single-family homes. So they know they have a problem, but they still didn't have the political and emotional will to move forward with it. This is especially true for rental housing, even though there's a great need for it. And while what we have to realize is not everyone wants to be a homeowner. Many communities don't want rental housing because they believe it's inferior. Now, this is kind of a Midwest view because, as Ryan said, we have lots of land. So in places where housing prices are very high and land is limited, such as San Francisco, most people assume they will rent for their entire lives. The average home price in San Francisco is $1.3 million and out of reach for most people. So 62% of people in San Francisco rent. There's no stigma to renting in San Francisco. And you can see from these tables that some US cities have home ownership levels below 30%. The lowest home ownership rates tend to be in cities that are the most expensive to live in. But even in cities with the greatest housing shortages, there is often pushback when new housing units are proposed. This is a really interesting study, especially if you're kind of a data geek like I am. There's some research that shows that English-speaking countries are worse at increasing housing supply compared to other developed nations. So what you're seeing here in red are the English-speaking countries. Related to that, English-speaking countries tend to have more negative views about living in apartments or having them built nearby. And I've included a link to the Financial Times article that this came from, and we'll share the slides with you so you can read it. The article has some hypotheses regarding why this is the case, and it's a very interesting kind of data point and study. But I want to share with you one of the most restrictive density rules in the country, and it applies to an entire state. In 1970, the state of Vermont passed Act 250. The law created a 9-district review process for all large-scale development projects, and their goal was to protect the environment, community life, and the aesthetic character of the state. So the commission has the power to issue or deny real estate developers for any project that encompasses more than 10 acres or even more than an acre for towns that don't have permanent zoning or subdivision bylaws. Here's the kicker. The law also applies to any development with more than 10 housing units. So in Vermont, 10 housing units is considered very dense. So what's the impact? Well, the Vermont Commissioner of Housing and Community Development said, we really have a system where one neighbor or a couple people can say, no, I just don't like that apartment building next to me, and stop it. So this has been going on since 1970. So what is this aesthetic character of Vermont they're trying to protect? I would say that what they're trying to protect is homelessness. Vermont ranks 3rd per capita in the United States among all states for homelessness. They need 30,000 new homes, yet what drives the homelessness is their self-imposed housing density rule. This is in a lot of areas that need housing. They won't change their, if Vermont changed that density rule, there would be developers who would come in and build housing immediately. So what can you do as you're looking at your community? Housing density is one of the few factors your community controls. And it's especially important to look as you're looking at older people in an age-friendly community. So here's a few things you can do. First, review your zoning policy's density rules and know what it is. Change the zoning to make it easier to build denser areas. In many areas, you need a planned unit development approval, which can be very, very cumbersome and cost a lot of money. So you can change zoning to say, hey, for multifamily, if you're building up to X number of units, you can build that without any other approval. When a new development's going in, ask questions about how you could gently increase the density. Could you put in townhomes, or could you put in some apartments in addition to single-family homes? And I would say one of the most important things is talk with people in your community who prefer to rent, especially younger people and older people, and give renters a voice so that the community begins to realize that they know people who prefer to rent. There are people in your family that prefer to rent. Maybe you prefer to rent. They need a voice too as part of a community. So housing density is really one of your most important tools for an age-friendly community. Here's my contact information in case you'd like to get in touch. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Oh, wow, Tim. Incredible presentation, so much here. I'm going to remind our audience that in the remaining 20 minutes here, just drop your questions into the chat box, or you can use the button and raise your hand and I'll call on you. We'll try to get as many questions in as we can. And I've got one right here in the chat box from Deborah Wilcox. Traditional neighborhoods had front porches. Housing architecture has broken up social cohesion along with gentrification, absentee landlords, and the exploitation of corporate housing developers. Speak to racism, housing inequity, and the meaning and definition of affordable housing. Well, we could do 20 minutes on that, I think, alone. But do you have thoughts on that, Tim?
Well, the first thing I would say is we talked about earlier, like West Dayton as an example. The issue there is not just capital coming in, it's that the area median income is about $28,000. So if you put more money in and raise rents, then it's gentrified, people can't live there. So it is a very complex problem. And certainly in the Dayton area, because of the redlining that went on, housing and housing issues are significantly tied to racism. There's no question about that. It certainly is a difficult thing to reverse because we didn't get here overnight. It took us a long time to get here. That's why this long-term view of planning is so critical and thinking about not just today, but down the road. But I definitely agree that one of the least expensive things we can do as we look at new housing is how do we design outside spaces so that it forms community? If you look at my neighborhood, people don't sit on their front porches. They built back decks that are screened from anybody else, so we don't run into people as much. I guess some people like that. When I grew up in Massachusetts, we had a big front porch that during the summer we ate dinner on. We knew everybody. People would walk by, they would stop up. The front porches was a social space. The University of Dayton has done a great job of that in its student neighborhood. When they put in new housing, they kept the front porches. And so looking at that community space outside in neighborhoods where people can gather and get to know people, that's critical. But we don't do that often with new homes. We want a gated community, then a house where we don't see our neighbors and we don't run into them. And I think that's when Ryan shared the slide about loneliness and fewer friends. I would say that's why. A lot of it has to do with housing and neighborhood design.
I will mention also the book, Hope. Do I have this up here? What an amazing book, Tim. It just recently published, Hope by Anna Lupke. Am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Mm-hmm.
UD student. She's with the UD's Ethics and Leadership Initiative.
One of the things that reasons we wanted to put that book together is having conversations with people and living to what their experiences are critical to create a good age-friendly community. As Ryan mentioned, we have 2 and almost 3 generations in our senior apartments. We may have a son who's 65 and his mom lives there and is 95 in the same building. So you have those multiple generations, but what people need and what their life experiences are really drive as we try to build community. What does that mean for them? And we found with our residents, we were surprised because we talked to them about their current life, but we hadn't talked to them about their childhoods a lot. And so just as an example, one of our residents, we asked, what did you do for fun as a kid? And she looked at us kind of quizzically, like she didn't understand what the question was. And she didn't understand the question because her family were sharecroppers. From the time she was 7 or 8 years old, she worked in the fields. Well, that was an experience that I can't even imagine what that was like. Trying to understand where she came from, what kind of shaped her. That's really important. So I think having conversations with people, especially the renters in your communities, hearing why they rent, what their goals are, not even with a purpose to create some project, but just to better understand them and build those bonds. I think that will help drive the policy and what your priorities are by having individual conversations, even more than a survey or looking at public data. That's all good, but sometimes it doesn't get to the heart of what a neighborhood really is. One of the best examples is there's some housing policy that would encourage people to move from West Dayton to the white suburbs. And the theory is, well, there's more amenities there, but it totally devalues how important that community is to the people that grew up there. I grew up in one of the poorest counties in Massachusetts. Opioid issues, unemployment. I love it. It's where I grew up. I love the town. My heart is with the town. And so people would say, well, why wouldn't your family move away from there? Well, we loved it. It's where our church was. It was where our families were. And I think seeing the good, and I would actually say that the white suburbs could learn a lot from West Dayton as far as what it means to be community. because oftentimes in like, I'm not that tied to Beaver Creek. I like living here, but I'm not tied to the community in the same way as where I grew up. And I think that's an important thing to look at. It's a great asset when a neighborhood or a town really has that kind of community. It's a very rare thing these days.
Georgia says, I'd like an explanation. Oops, just jumped up. Hang on. Like an explanation, justification for the relatively high setbacks required by jurisdictions.
So that's a great point. A lot of rules on had to do with safety rules. So for instance, you have to have 20 feet between homes. Why is that in most areas? Minimum 20 feet. That's so that a fire won't go between them. Why do we have our roads the size that they are? Because I think it goes back to a law about if there was two fire engines driving fast that they could pass each other in there. So there are some rules that probably that make sense. But some of them are more arbitrary. If you look in Dayton, there are some houses that are very small that you could, under 1,000 square feet, that you probably couldn't build easily today without those setbacks. So things were grandfathered in. But that's the type of question you should ask a municipality. What is the reason for that? Maybe there's a good reason, but maybe there's not. Yeah. And so maybe you don't need as big a bigger setback. And so those are the exact type of questions to find out. Is there a reason, or is it outdated, or is it just arbitrary?
I see John joining us from his car, and I want to keep him safe here, but I'm going to ask you to unmute, John, and ask your question.
Yes. So I'm a housing activist in Yellow Springs. The Council Planning Commission has sent some zoning reforms regarding residential uses, like making multifamily allowed in all districts, at least as a conditional use. And our group is going to be pushing for council to go even further and make it a permitted use. And, we also want to work on, those setback issues, those density limits with the next set of reforms. Council is skeptical that these reforms will help with affordability. And council's lawyer and some of the opponents are arguing that the reforms are illegal under the Constitution, that they would be a regulatory taking, which I believe is an entirely fallacious legal argument. But in any case, once you've gotten this far in the sort of process of reform, what sort of like housing experts, sort of policy people, we're basically just regular lay people working on this. Who can we connect with that could basically be helpful in writing letters to council, et cetera?
So it's a great question. So Yellow Springs is interesting because on one hand, Yellow Springs is very open to different types of housing in ways that a lot of cities aren't. Yellow Springs also has some anti-sprawl policies, which has kept the development within the city, which can be a good thing, but has also driven up housing prices a lot. So it's very hard to find rental. And I'm on the asset management committee for Yellow Springs Home Inc. We had a meeting yesterday, so I'm very familiar with kind of what's going on. And St. Mary's has tried to develop some housing there too. There are different, depending on what the issue is, there are different policies and things out there. It is complicated because you get into fair housing rules, and there's a lot of different rules that are out there. So I think it comes down to like a policy by policy issue. Like if it was the previous question about setbacks, if it's a setback issue, what can you do? But communities do have more leeway than they think often. What I'm surprised about is even when it's possible to develop, there's a lot of pushback for things. We had to go through a PUD process in Yellow Springs. The city was great to work with, but it's still a long process to go through and find land. And we went through neighborhood meetings and things. All of those things drive up costs. If you talk to any housing developer, they're not eating that. If they have to go to 100 meetings, they're putting the cost of 100 meetings into the homes. They're trying to make a profit on it. So anything you can do to streamline that process. But the better thing might be for us to talk offline about some of the specific things you're running into. There are some great examples out there. Part of it is that Ohio is a home rule state. So we allow cities and counties to create whatever rules they want. That can be good in some cases, but it can also be problematic because it's hard to be an expert. If you're in a small rural town, it's hard to have people who are experts in all of these things. So we can definitely share some resources and organizations that put out templates for model policy and things like that.
Tim, another related topic that actually we've just started looking at more closely, grandparents raising grandchildren. And Georgiana has a question that kind of touches on this. I see children moving in with seniors to allow them to remain in senior housing as costs increase. So the motivation might be on either side of the generations there, but how do you influence the safety and amenities that go with housing? Consistently, families moved out of the community to meet their educational needs of their children. Comments, thoughts?
Well, I think one thing to remember is that, remember I shared that for people who are, I think it was like 54 to 65, the median retirement amount saved was $90,000. So at least half, vast more than that, they have no options. If you own a house and you only have $90,000 for the next 30 years with the repairs and everything like that, some people who are more affluent have choices within that. Most people don't. So if they're taking care of their grandkids, they don't have money to put into the house to fix things like that. If they wanted to move, there's very little housing stock to move across the entire United States. There's a housing shortage, which is why we've seen rents go up and other things. So I think it's as you're looking at what is age friendly, you have to remember that I'm seeing stats now that say if you have not saved $2 million for retirement, you will run out of money. Which means that in most communities, most people will only be living off Social Security at some point in their retirement, which is probably going to be $25,000 a year. We haven't planned for that at all. If you own a home and your income is $25,000 a year, how are you going to fix the roof or put in a new water heater? You won't. So as communities, those are the type of things as we look at density, what are the options? If I'm a senior and my income is low and I can't take care of my house, but there's no other place for me to go, I will live in my house and it will fall down around me and it will turn into blight, which we've seen a lot of in local communities. They're trapped within it. Even if they can sell it, if there's not an apartment to move to, that's why looking at this full range of housing and single family homes, apartments, and getting the mix right is so critical.
Absolutely. And Georgia chimes in. She's wondering what your thoughts are on places like Habitat for Humanity that allows for the recycling of reusable materials, for renovating spaces. You want to speak to that?
All of those things are good. I think when we look at environmental issues, and I am all for taking care of our environment in better ways. I mean, it's a high priority for me. There's also a cost to it. So I'll give you an example. My parents bought a house in their retirement and they wanted to renovate it in a significant way so that they could age in it. And the builder told them, if we renovate it this way, it's going to cost you more than tearing it down and building new. So what did they do? They did tear it down, but they saved everything. A company came in and saved every nail, every 2x4 to reuse it. So you can do that. But oftentimes what's good on the environmental side has a higher cost up front. So we have to decide as communities, where is that balance? If we can pull that stuff together. I love seeing things reused like that. I mean, it's just wonderful when we can do it. It just depends on what the return on investment is and who funds that return on investment. If you're a homeowner and you want to put in solar and you can afford to do so, that's great. It's really no difference than buying electric vehicles. They're more expensive right now. As they get cheaper, more people will do it. But right now, there was a time when we would do the evaluation even on hybrids and it'd be like, well, we're going to pay, it's really not going to help the environment is a huge amount today, but as technology gets better, I think we'll see more and more of that. I think a bigger thing is, how can we adapt current housing? Can you turn a single family into 2 apartments so that it's more cost effective? That's probably has a bigger impact, I think, on the housing stock and affordability. Right now in the Dayton area, a new single family home, I think the average is like $400,000. There's no way to build much that's affordable. That's not affordable for anybody without significant subsidy. So new construction is pretty difficult, and even rehabs can be very expensive and difficult to do. So home ownership is something that I think is only going to be available to people with significant means in the future, just because interest rates and construction costs have gone up so much.